The wind howled across the frozen slopes of Gunjorn Fjell, the highest peak in the Arctic, a jagged monster of ice and rock piercing the Greenland sky. It was July 2025. But summer meant nothing here. Temperatures hovered at -20, the air so sharp it burned your lungs. Snow swirled in the pre-dawn light, a gray haze that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. Eva Larsson stood at the base of the mountain, her boots crunching on fresh powder, her heart pounding like a drum. At 28, she was no stranger to mountains, but this one was different. Gunjorn Fjell wasn't just a climb. It was a promise, a reckoning, a chance to bury the fear that had haunted her for years. Eva was tall and lean, her brown hair pulled into a tight braid under her hood, her green eyes sharp but shadowed. She adjusted her backpack, heavy with climbing gear, ice axes, crampons, ropes, and glanced at the small team around her. For climbers, including her, bundled in parkas, their faces half hidden by scarves. Lars Jensen, their guide, was a broad-shouldered Greenlander with a weathered face and gray eyes that saw everything. At 45, he'd climbed this peak a dozen times, and his no-nonsense vibe made it clear he didn't suffer fools. The other two, Eric and Sophia, were experienced climbers from Norway, their confidence a stark contrast to Eva's quiet nerves. "You ready, Eva?" Lars asked, his voice cutting through the wind. His accent was thick, his tone all business. Eva nodded, her breath puffing white in the cold. "Yeah, let's do this." But inside, she wasn't so sure. Gunjorn Fjell was 3,694 meters of brutal terrain. Ice walls, crevasses, storms that could bury you in minutes. She'd trained for months, pushed her body to the limit. But this wasn't just about strength. It was about Ethan, her brother, who died 5 years ago on a mountain not so different from this one. She was here to honor him, to finish what he'd dreamed of. But the weight of that dream felt heavier than her pack. Back in Colorado, Eva's life had been safe, predictable. She worked as a graphic designer, lived in a small apartment with her cat, and avoided heights after Ethan's accident. But last year, she'd found his journal, tucked away in a box of his things. The pages were filled with sketches of peaks, notes about climbs, and one entry that stopped her cold. Gunjorn Fjell, Greenland. The ultimate test. "I'll stand on that summit someday, feel the Arctic in my bones." Ethan never got the chance. A rock slide in the Rockies took him at 25, leaving Eva with guilt she couldn't shake. She hadn't been fast enough, strong enough to save him. That journal changed everything. Eva decided to climb Gunjorn Fjell for Ethan, to prove she could face her fear. She'd spent a year training, running trails, scaling ice walls, learning to trust her gear. She'd called her best friend Mia Torres, a journalist with a knack for adventure stories, and convinced her to come along to document the trip. Mia was back at base camp now, her curly black hair probably tucked under a beanie, her notebook ready to capture every moment. Eva could almost hear her voice, warm and teasing. "You got this, Eva. Show that mountain who's boss." But standing here, with the wind screaming and the peak looming, Eva wasn't so sure. The Arctic felt alive, like it was watching her, testing her. She tightened her gloves, her fingers stiff in the cold, and followed Lars as the team started up the first slope. 5 years ago, in the summer of 2020, Eva and Ethan had been inseparable. They'd grown up in Boulder, Colorado, where mountains were as much a part of life as breathing. Ethan, 3 years older, was the fearless one, blonde hair, reckless grin, always chasing the next summit. Eva was quieter, more cautious, but she followed him, learning to climb, trusting his lead. They tackled peaks in the Rockies, laughing through the pain, sharing granola bars at the top. That last climb was different. They were on Mount Elbert, a tough but familiar route. Ethan was ahead as usual, his voice echoing back. "Come on, Eva, keep up." She was slower, her legs burning. When the rocks gave way, a slide, sudden and brutal, swept Ethan down the slope. Eva screamed, scrambling after him, but it was too late. By the time she reached him, he was gone, his body still, his eyes open to the sky. The months after were a blur. Eva quit climbing, moved to Denver, buried herself in work. She couldn't look at mountains without seeing Ethan's face. Her parents tried to help, but they were grieving too. Mia was the only one who got through, dragging Eva to coffee shops, making her laugh despite the pain. But the guilt stayed. A knot in Ava's chest. She hadn't saved him. She'd failed. Finding Ethan's journal in 2024 was like hearing his voice again. The words about Gunjorn Feel lit something in her. A spark of purpose. Maybe or defiance. She couldn't bring him back. But she could climb that peak. Stand where he'd wanted to stand. It was crazy, reckless even, but it felt right. She called Mia that night. Her voice trembling. I'm going to Greenland. I'm climbing the highest peak in the Arctic. For Ethan. Mia didn't hesitate. I'm in. I'll write the story, make it epic. But you gotta promise to come back, okay? Ava laughed, her first real laugh in months. Deal. Getting to Greenland wasn't easy. Ava spent a year preparing. Her days a grind of training and planning. She ran 10 miles a day, lifted weights, practiced ice climbing with a grizzled coach named Pete who didn't sugarcoat anything. Ice is a killer, he'd say. His beard flecked with frost. You slip, you die. Respect it. Ava listened, her body growing stronger, her fear a constant shadow she pushed down. She researched Gunjorn Feel, learning its dangers, sub-zero temps, gale force winds, crevasses that could swallow a truck. She found Lars Jensen online, a Greenlandic guide with a reputation for getting people up and down alive. His emails were short, blunt. This is not a beginner's climb. Send me your experience. Ava sent a resume of her climbs, leaving out the 5-year gap, and held her breath. Lars agreed to take her. But his reply was clear. You fall behind, you're done. I don't carry anyone. Mia joined her in Denver for the final prep, helping pack gear and cracking jokes to ease the tension. You're gonna be the badass who conquers the Arctic, she said, tossing Ava a pair of wool socks. Just don't freeze your butt off, okay? Ava smiled, but her stomach churned. She wasn't a badass. She was scared, and the closer the trip got, the louder that fear screamed. They flew to Nuuk, Greenland's capital, then took a bumpy helicopter ride to a base camp near Gunjorn Feel. The Arctic was another world. Endless ice, sky so wide it hurt to look at, silence broken only by the wind. Mia stayed at base camp, her laptop and radio ready to track the climb. I'll be your cheerleader, she said, hugging Ava tight. Go make Ethan proud. Ava wanted to believe she could. But as she met Lars and the team, Eric, a cocky Norwegian with a blonde beard, and Sophia, a quiet woman with steel in her eyes, she felt out of place. They were pros. She was the girl who hadn't climbed since her brother died. Still, she squared her shoulders, shook their hands, and said, let's do this. Ethan's journal, tucked in her pack, felt like a talisman, urging her on. The first day's climb was grueling. The team moved up a gentle slope, their crampons biting into the ice, their breath puffing in the frigid air. Lars led, his steps sure, barking orders when someone lagged. Stay tight, watch your footing, he shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. Ava kept pace, her muscles straining, her ice axe a lifeline. The slope steepened and she felt the mountain's power, its cold seeping through her layers. Eric grumbled behind her, his Norwegian accent sharp. Move faster, Colorado. We're not on a hike. Ava's cheeks burned, but she didn't reply, focusing on her steps. Sophia Kinder gave her a nod, like she'd been there. Lars didn't comment, just watched, his eyes narrowing when Ava fumbled her axe. They stopped to rest at a flat ledge, the wind calmer here. Ava sipped water, her hands numb, and looked up at the peak still miles above. It was beautiful, snow dusting the ridges, ice glinting like diamonds, but it was terrifying too. She thought of Ethan, his grin when they'd reached a summit, his voice saying, this is living, Ava. She wanted to feel that, but all she felt was the knot in her chest, the fear that she'd fail him again. Lars crouched beside her, his face unreadable. You're doing fine, he said, surprising her. But this mountain doesn't care about your reasons. Focus or it'll eat you alive. Ava nodded, swallowing hard. I'm trying. Try harder, he said, but his tone wasn't cruel, just honest. He stood, clapping his hands. Let's move. The team roped up, their harnesses linked for safety, and started again. Ava's legs burned, her breath short, but she pushed on step by step. The Arctic stretched around her, vast and empty, and for a moment she felt small, like the mountain could erase her. She thought of Mia, waiting below, and Ethan, somewhere in the stars. She gripped her axe tighter, her resolve hardening. That night they set up camp at 1,500 meters, their tents battered by the wind. Ava crawled into her sleeping bag, exhausted but wired. She pulled out Ethan's journal, reading his words by headlamp. Gunjorn Feel. I'll feel the Arctic in my bones. She traced the ink, her fingers trembling. I'm here, Ethan, she whispered. I'm trying. Outside, the wind howled like the mountain was answering. Ava closed her eyes, her heart racing, knowing tomorrow would be harder. She was climbing for Ethan, but she was also climbing for herself, and that scared her most of all. The wind outside Ava Larson's Denver apartment was a low moan, rattling the windows like it was trying to get in. It was late fall 2024, and Ava sat cross-legged on her couch, a mug of coffee gone cold in her hands. At 28, she was lean from running trails, her brown hair pulled into a messy bun, her green eyes fixed on a worn journal open on her lap. The pages were filled with her brother Ethan's handwriting, sketches of mountains, notes about climbs, dreams he'd never lived to chase. One entry, circled in blue ink, had changed everything. Gunjorn Feel, Greenland. The ultimate test. I'll stand on that summit someday. Ava's throat tightened as she traced the words. Ethan had been gone 5 years, taken by a rockslide on a Colorado peak. She'd spent those years running from mountains, from memories, from the guilt of not saving him. But this journal, found in a box of his things, was like a voice from the grave calling her back. She'd decided to climb Gunjorn Feel, the highest peak in the Arctic, for him. It was crazy, maybe even stupid, but it felt like the only way to make things right. Her cat, Nimbus, curled up beside her, purring softly. The apartment was small, cluttered with art supplies and running shoes, a safe bubble where Ava had hidden since Ethan's death. But safe wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to feel alive again, the way she had with Ethan, summiting peaks, the world wide open below. She wanted to stand on that Arctic peak and let go of the fear that had chained her. Ava grabbed her phone and called Mia Torres, her best friend, the one person who'd stuck by her through the worst. Mia was a journalist, 30, with curly black hair and a laugh that could light up a room. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm. Yo, Ava, what's up? You okay? Ava took a breath, her words tumbling out. I'm going to Greenland. Gunjorn Feel. The highest peak in the Arctic. For Ethan. I found his journal and I have to do this. There was a pause, then Mia's voice. Serious now. Whoa, that's huge. You sure? I mean, you haven't climbed since. I know. Ava cut in, her voice shaky. But I can't keep running from it. Ethan wanted this. I need to do it for him. For me. Mia didn't push, didn't doubt. Okay, then I'm in. I'll come with you, write the story. Make it epic. But you gotta promise to come back in one piece, deal? Ava laughed, relief washing over her. Deal. The decision to climb Gunjorn Feel wasn't just a whim. It was a war with herself. After Ethan's death in 2020, Ava had quit climbing, moved from Boulder to Denver, and built a life that didn't include heights. She'd taken a job as a graphic designer, sketching logos instead of peaks, and avoided the Rockies, their shadows too full of memories. Her parents, still grieving Ethan, called every week, their voices soft with worry. Ava told them she was fine, but she wasn't. She was stuck, haunted by the moment she'd watched Ethan fall, her screams echoing as the rocks took him. Finding the journal had been an accident. She'd been cleaning out her closet, sorting through old boxes, when she found it, a leather-bound notebook. Ethan's messy handwriting spilling across the pages. She'd sat on the floor reading for hours, tears blurring the ink. His words were alive, full of fire. Climbing's not just about the summit. It's about facing the fear, feeling the world breathe with you. The entry about Gunjorn Feel was the last, unfinished, like he'd meant to write more. Ava knew then she had to finish it for him. But knowing and doing were different. Gunjorn Feel was no weekend hike. At 3,694 meters, it was a beast of ice and rock, with sub-zero temperatures, brutal winds, and crevasses that could swallow you whole. Ava wasn't a pro like Ethan. She'd been a good climber, but 5 years away had dulled her skills, her confidence. She'd have to start from scratch. And the thought made her stomach churn. She began training the next day, her apartment a makeshift gym. She ran 10 miles along the city trails, her lungs burning, her legs screaming. She lifted weights in a corner gym, ignoring the stares of meatheads twice her size. She found a climbing coach, Pete, a grizzled 60-year-old with a beard like a snowdrift and a voice like gravel. Pete had climbed everything from Everest to Denali, and he didn't coddle her. Ice climbing's not like rock, he said, watching her fumble with an ice axe on a practice wall. You slip, you're done. You scared? Ava's jaw tightened. Yeah, but I'm doing it anyway. Pete nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. Good. Fear's honest. Use it. For months Ava trained, her body hardening, her hands callous from ropes and axes. She studied Gunjorn Feel, poring over maps and weather reports. The mountain was remote, accessible only by helicopter, with storms that could trap you for days. She learned about frostbite, avalanches, the way ice could betray you. Each fact was a needle pricking her fear, but she kept going. Ethan's journal her anchor. Mia was Ava's lifeline through it all. She'd fly up from her home in Albuquerque, crashing on Ava's couch, helping pack gear and cracking jokes. You're gonna look like a badass in all this Gore-Tex, she said, holding up a parka. Like Arctic warrior vibes. Ava rolled her eyes, but Mia's energy was contagious, pulling her out of dark moments when doubt crept in. Mia wasn't just there for laughs. She was planning a feature for an adventure magazine, The Arctic Climb, one woman's quest for redemption. She'd record Ava's journey, from training to the summit, weaving Ethan's story into it. This is bigger than you, Mia told her one night, her voice serious. People need to hear this, how you're facing your demons. It's gonna inspire someone. Ava shrugged, uneasy with the spotlight. I just want to get up and down alive. You will, Mia said, her eyes fierce. And I'll be there, cheering you on. Ava needed that. She'd reached out to Lars Jensen, the Greenlandic guide, after weeks of research. His reputation was ironclad, tough, experienced, no patience for amateurs. She sent him her climbing resume, glossing over the 5-year gap, and waited, her nerves frayed. When he agreed, his email was blunt. This is a serious climb. You keep up or you go home. Meet in Nuuk, July 2025. Ava read it 10 times, relief mixing with dread. She told her parents about the climb over dinner, their faces paling. Ava, it's dangerous. Her mom said, her voice trembling. Ethan would want you safe, not risking your life. Ava's chest tightened. I know, but he'd want this too. I have to do it, Mom. For him. Her dad, quiet until then, nodded. Just come back to us, okay? I will, Ava promised, hoping she could keep it. July 2025 arrived too fast. Ava and Mia flew to Nuuk, Greenland's tiny capital, a city of colorful houses dwarfed by mountains and sea. The air was crisp, the sky a sharp blue Ava had never seen. They met Lars at a small airfield, his broad frame filling the doorway of a hangar. His gray eyes sized Ava up like he was looking for cracks. You're the Colorado girl, he said, his accent thick. Ready for the real thing? Ava forced a smile, her stomach flipping. Ready as I'll ever be. Lars introduced the team. Eric, a Norwegian climber with a blonde beard and a cocky grin, and Sophia, a wiry woman with calm eyes and a quick nod. They were pros. Their gear worn but perfect, their movements sure. Ava felt like a kid playing dress-up, her brand-new parka too bright, her hands clumsy with nerves. They boarded a helicopter to base camp, the ride a stomach-churning blur of ice and rock below. Mia stayed behind, setting up her gear, laptop, radio, satellite phone to track the climb. She hugged Ava tight, her voice fierce. You're stronger than you know. Go make Ethan proud. Ava nodded, her throat tight. Thanks, Mia. Keep the coffee hot for me. Mia laughed, waving as the chopper lifted off. Always. Base camp was a cluster of tents at the foot of Gunjorn Feel, the mountain looming like a giant asleep under snow. The Arctic was raw, endless. Ice fields stretching to the horizon. Sky so wide it swallowed you. Ava felt small, exposed, the wind cutting through her layers. Lars gathered the team, his voice sharp. This is no game, he said, pointing at the peak. Minos Tiati. Winds up to 80 miles an hour, crevasses you won't see till you're in them. You listen, you move smart, you live. Understand. The team nodded, Ava's heart racing. Eric smirked, muttering, Hope you're not slowing us down, Colorado. Sophia elbowed him, but Ava's cheeks burned. She'd prove herself or die trying. That night in her tent, Ava read Ethan's journal by headlamp, her fingers tracing his words. The Arctic's where you feel alive, where fear meets truth. She closed her eyes, picturing his grin, his hand pulling her up a climb. I'm doing this, Ethan. She whispered. Don't let me fall. The wind answered a low growl that shook the tent. Ava zipped her sleeping bag, her fear a heavy weight, but her resolve heavier. Tomorrow, they'd start the climb, and she'd face the mountain and herself. The Arctic dawn was a pale smear of light, barely cutting through the gray haze over Gunjorn Field. It was July 2025, day 2 of the climb, and the wind screamed across the ice, sharp enough to sting Ava Larsson's face through her balaclava. At 28, she was roped to a team of climbers, her crampons digging into a steep snow slope. Her ice axe a lifeline in the frozen world of Greenland's highest peak. The mountain was a beast, 3,694 meters of rock and ice, with crevasses hidden under fresh powder and storms that could bury you in minutes. Ava's breath puffed white, her muscles burning, but it was her heart that felt heaviest, weighed down by fear and the memory of her brother, Ethan. Lars Jensen, their Greenlandic guide, led the way, his broad frame cutting a path through the snow. At 45, Lars was all grit, his gray eyes scanning the terrain like a hawk. Behind Ava, Eric and Sophia, the Norwegian climbers moved with practiced ease, their steps sure despite the wind's howl. Ava felt like the odd one out, her hands clumsy with the axe, her legs trembling from more than just the cold. She was here to honor Ethan, to climb the peak he'd dreamed of, but every step reminded her how far she was from the climber she used to be. Keep it tight, Ava. Lars barked, his voice sharp over the wind. Watch your footing. Ava nodded, gripping the rope, her fingers numb inside her gloves. The slope was brutal, a 40-degree incline slick with ice. She drove her axe in, testing its hold, and pulled herself up, her crampons scraping for purchase. Her training in Colorado had been intense, ice walls, endurance runs, but this was different. The Arctic didn't care about her reasons, her grief, or her grit. One wrong move, and she'd be a memory. Just like Ethan. The first day of the climb had been a grind, but manageable. They'd gained 1,500 meters, setting up camp in a shallow bowl shielded from the worst of the wind. Ava had struggled with her gear, fumbling the knots, her axe slipping once and earning a sharp look from Eric. You sure you belong here, Colorado? He'd muttered, his blonde beard flecked with frost. Sophia, quieter, had given her a small smile, like she knew what it was to be the underdog. Lars hadn't commented, just watched, his silence louder than words. That night in her tent, Ava had read Ethan's journal by headlamp, her fingers tracing his sketch of Gunjorn Field. The Arctic's where you feel alive, he'd written, where fear meets truth. She'd whispered his name, her breath clouding in the cold, and tried to sleep. But the wind's howl kept her awake, stirring memories of Ethan, his reckless grin, his hand pulling her up a climb, his body broken in the rocks. She'd pushed the images down, focusing on tomorrow. She had to keep moving for him. Now on day 2, the mountain was testing her. The team was aiming for 2,500 meters, a push through a series of ice fields and rock outcrops. The terrain was unforgiving. Smooth ice gave way to jagged stone, then back to snow that hit crevasses. Lars led them single file, his ice axe probing for weak spots. Stay on my line, he shouted, his voice barely audible over the wind. Ava's legs ached, her lungs screaming in the thin air. She was slower than the others, her movements deliberate where theirs were fluid. Eric's impatience was obvious. He'd sigh when she paused, his mutters carrying on the wind. We're not here to babysit, he said once, loud enough for her to hear. Ava's cheeks burned, but she bit her tongue, driving her axe harder into the ice. Sophia, climbing behind her, spoke up, her voice calm. Ignore him, Ava. You're doing fine. First big climb's always rough. Ava glanced back, grateful. Thanks. I'm trying. You're here, Sophia said, her eyes crinkling. That's more than most. The words helped, but they didn't erase the doubt gnawing at Ava. She thought of Mia, her best friend, back at base camp with her radio and notebook, probably scribbling notes for her magazine article. Mia's voice crackled through the radio clipped to Ava's harness. A lifeline to the world below. Yo, Ava, you killing it up there? She asked, her tone bright despite the static. Ava pressed the button, her voice hoarse. Trying, Mia. It's intense. You got this, Mia said, her warmth cutting through the cold. Ethan's cheering you on, you know? Ava's throat tightened. Yeah, thanks. She clipped the radio back. Mia's words a spark in the dark. Ethan was with her, in the journal in her pack, in the dream she was chasing. She pushed forward, her axe sinking deep, her focus sharpening. The day took a turn when they hit an ice wall, a near-vertical slab gleaming under the weak sun. Lars stopped, assessing it, his face unreadable. We climb this, he said, uncoiling a rope. Fixed line one at a time. Ava, you're second. Ava's stomach dropped. She'd practiced ice walls with Pete, her coach, but this was real, hundreds of feet above the ground, with wind clawing at her back. She nodded, her mouth dry. Got it. Lars went first, his movements precise, his axe and crampons carving a path. He set anchors, clipping the rope, creating a line for the team. Ava followed, her heart hammering. She drove her axe in, kicked her crampons into the ice, and pulled herself up inch by inch. The wall was slick, the cold seeping through her gloves, her arms trembling with effort. Halfway up, her axe slipped, skittering across the ice. Ava gasped, her body lurching, but the rope held, her harness catching her weight. She hung there, her breath ragged, her eyes wide. Below, Eric cursed, his voice sharp. Come on, Colorado, get it together. Shut up, Eric, Sophia snapped, her tone fierce. She's fine. Lars's voice came from above, calm but firm. Ava, breathe. Reset your axe. You've got this. Ava closed her eyes, forcing air into her lungs. She thought of Ethan, his voice in her head. Slow and steady, Ava. You're stronger than you think. She reset her axe, drove it deep, and kept climbing, her fear of fire she refused to let win. When she reached the top, Lars grabbed her hand, pulling her onto a ledge. Good, he said, his eyes meeting hers. You're tougher than you look. Ava managed a shaky smile, her legs like jelly. Thanks. The team made it up, Eric last, his face red but silent. They rested, sipping water, the wind quieter here. Ava looked down, the ice field below a dizzying drop. Her stomach twisted. Memories of Ethan's fall flashing, rocks tumbling, his body gone. She turned away, her breath short, her hands shaking. Lars noticed, his voice low. You thinking about him? Ava stiffened, surprised. How do you know? Your eyes, he said, shrugging. I've seen that look. Lost someone on a climb, yeah. She nodded, her throat tight. My brother. 5 years ago. Lars's face softened. Just a fraction. Mountains take, but they give too. Keep climbing. It's how you find peace. Ava didn't know if she believed him, but his words stuck, like a seed planted. She clipped her water bottle back, ready to move. By late afternoon, they reached 2,000 meters, a flat shelf where they'd camp. The sky was darkening, clouds heavy with the threat of a storm. Lars ordered them to set up tents, his voice urgent. Fast, before the wind picks up. Ava worked with Sophia, hammering stakes into the ice, her hands numb but steady. Eric and Lars secured the gear. Their movements quick. The wind grew sharper, snow stinging Ava's face. She thought of Pete's warnings. Storms in the Arctic could kill in hours. Her fear spiked, but she pushed it down, tying knots with focus she didn't know she had. When the tents were up, the team crawled inside, the storm hitting hard. The walls of Ava's tent shook, the wind a roar that drowned out thought. She sat with Sophia, their headlamps casting shadows, sharing a protein bar. This normal? Ava asked, her voice small. Sophia chuckled, her face calm. Yeah, Arctic's just saying hello. You did good today. Ava's chest warmed, but the storm outside mirrored the one inside her. She pulled out Ethan's journal, flipping to his sketch of Gunjorn Feel. Fear meets truth he'd written. She thought of the ice wall, her slip, the way she'd kept going. Maybe that was truth, falling but getting up. The radio crackled, Mia's voice breaking through. Ava, you there? Sounds like a wild night. Ava grabbed it, smiling despite the storm. Yeah, Mia. It's a party up here.
Mia laughed, static crackling.
You're a rock star. Keep kicking butt, okay? I'm proud of you. Thanks, Ava said, her voice thick. Talk tomorrow? Bet on it, Mia said, signing off. Ava tucked the radio away, the storm raging outside. She looked at Sophia, then at the journal and felt a shift, small but real. She was scared, yeah, but she was here climbing, fighting. For Ethan. For herself. The tent shook, but Ava closed her eyes. Her fear still there, but quieter now. Tomorrow they'd push higher, closer to the summit, and she'd face whatever the mountain threw at her. The summit of Gumjorn Fjell was a knife edge of ice and rock, bathed in the eerie half-light of an Arctic noon. It was July 2025, day 4 of the climb, and Ava Larsson stood at 3,694 meters, the highest point in Greenland, her boots planted on a narrow ledge. The wind howled, a relentless roar that tore at her parka, and the world below was a sea of snow and shadow, stretching to the horizon. At 28, Ava had fought her way up this monster of a mountain to honor her brother Ethan, but now at the top she didn't feel triumph. She felt terror. Raw and choking, like the Arctic itself was pressing down on her chest. Ava's breath came in shallow gasps, her green eyes wide behind her goggles. Her brown hair, tucked into a braid, was crusted with frost. She gripped her ice axe, her knuckles white inside her gloves, but it felt useless against the vastness around her. The climb had been brutal, ice walls, crevasses, a storm that nearly buried their camp, but she'd made it, driven by Ethan's journal and the promise to finish his dream. Now, standing here, she was unraveling, her fear louder than the wind. Lars Jensen, their Greenlandic guide, stood a few feet away, checking the ropes, his weathered face calm despite the gale. At 45, Lars was a rock, his gray eyes steady as he scanned the team. Eric and Sophia, the Norwegian climbers, were nearby, snapping photos, their voices muffled but triumphant. Ava was the odd one out, frozen in place, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. You okay, Ava? Lars called, his voice cutting through the wind. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the ice. Ava nodded. But it was a lie. Yeah, she managed, her voice thin. Just taking it in. Lars's eyes narrowed, like he could see through her. He didn't push, but he stayed close, his presence a quiet anchor. Ava turned away, looking out at the Arctic, endless ice fields, jagged peaks, a sky so wide it swallowed her. She'd expected to feel Ethan here, his spirit lifting her, but all she felt was alone. The summit wasn't a victory. It was a mirror, showing her every fear she'd tried to bury. The push to the summit had been the hardest yet. Day 3 had ended at 2,800 meters. After a grueling climb through a snowfield riddled with crevasses, Ava had held her own, her ice axe and crampons finding rhythm, but Eric's snide comments, "Keep up, Colorado," still stung. Sophia's quiet encouragement and Mia's radio check-ins from base camp kept her going, but Ethan's memory was the real fuel. She'd read his journal each night, his words about Gumjorn Fjell a beacon. The Arctic's where you feel alive, where fear meets truth. Day 4 started with the final ascent, a 900-meter slog to the top. The team faced a vertical ice wall, a beast of a climb that tested every skill. Lars led, setting anchors, his movements precise. Ava went second, her heart in her throat. The wall was sheer, the ice slick under her crampons. She drove her axe in, kicked her boots, and pulled herself up inch by inch, the wind clawing at her back. Halfway up, disaster struck. Ava's crampons slipped, her body lurching as ice crumbled beneath her. She screamed, her axe scraping, but the rope held, Lars's anchor catching her weight. She dangled, her breath ragged, the drop below a dizzying void. Her mind flashed to Ethan, rocks tumbling, his body gone, and panic clawed at her. Ava, focus! Lars shouted from above, his voice sharp but steady. Reset your crampon. You're secure. Ava's hands shook, but she forced herself to breathe, to move. She kicked her crampon back into the ice, tested it, and climbed. Her fear of fire she refused to let win. When she reached the top, Lars grabbed her arm, pulling her onto a ledge. Good, he said, his eyes meeting hers. You're tougher than that slip. Ava nodded, her legs like jelly, but pride flickered through her fear. She'd fallen, but she'd gotten up. The team made it over the wall, Eric silent for once, Sophia giving her a nod. They pushed on, the summit close now, a jagged ridge under a steel gray sky. At the top, the team unroped, the narrow summit too small for tethers. Eric and Sophia laughed, snapping selfies, their voices light with victory. Lars checked the weather, his radio crackling with updates from base camp. Ava stood apart, her axe planted in the snow, her eyes on the horizon. She'd done it, climbed Gunjornfjell, the peak Ethan had dreamed of. She'd expected to feel strong, whole, but instead, her fear roared louder than ever. The Arctic was too big, too empty. The ice stretched forever, no sign of life, no warmth, just cold and silence. Ava's chest tightened, her breath shallow. She saw Ethan's face, his body broken in the rocks, and her guilt crashed over her like a wave. What if she'd failed him again? What if this climb meant nothing? The summit felt like a trap, the mountain mocking her, whispering that she'd never be enough. She sank to her knees, her axe clattering, her goggles fogging with tears. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice lost in the wind. "Ethan, I'm sorry." Lars was there in an instant, kneeling beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "Ava, look at me," he said, his voice firm but kind. "Breathe. Slow. In and out." Ava tried, her breaths ragged, her hands shaking. Lars pulled her goggles up, his gray eyes locking onto hers. "You're panicking," he said. "It's the altitude, the isolation. It happens. You're not alone." Ava shook her head, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I thought I'd feel him here, Ethan. But it's just nothing."
I'm scared, Lars.
"I failed him." Lars's face softened, a rare crack in his tough exterior. "Listen," he said, his voice low. "I lost a friend on a climb years ago. K2. I was there, couldn't save him. Felt like my fault for a long time. But mountains aren't about fixing the past. They're about facing it. You're here, Ava. You made it. That's not failure." His words cut through her panic, a lifeline in the storm. Ava nodded, her breathing slowing, her hands steadying. Lars stayed with her, his presence solid, until she could stand again. The radio crackled, Mia's voice breaking through. "Ava, you there? You hit the summit yet?" Her tone was bright, but worry crept in when Ava didn't answer right away. Lars handed her the radio, his eyes encouraging. Ava pressed the button, her voice shaky but stronger. "Yeah, Mia. I'm here. Made it." Mia whooped, the sound warm even through static. "That's my girl. Ethan's throwing a party up there, I bet. You okay?" Ava managed a small laugh, tears still falling. "Getting there. Thanks, Mia. You're a freaking hero," Mia said. "I'm so proud. Talk soon?" "Yeah," Ava said, clipping the radio back. Mia's voice, Lars's words. They were anchors, pulling her back from the edge. Lars gave her space, joining Eric and Sophia to set up a small marker, a cairn of stones for the summit. Ava watched, her panic ebbing but not gone. She pulled Ethan's journal from her pack, her fingers numb as she flipped to his Gunjorn page. "Fear meets truth," he'd written. She looked at the cairn, then at the ice around her, and an idea formed. She grabbed her ice axe, her hands steadier now, and knelt by a flat rock near the summit's edge. With careful strikes, she carved Ethan's name into the stone, Edhn. Each letter a release, a letting go. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't just pain. They were relief, love, a goodbye she'd never said. "This is for you," she whispered, touching the carving. "I made it."
Lars what's it?
His face unreadable but his eyes soft. Sophia and Eric joined her, their silence respectful. "That's beautiful," Sophia said, her voice quiet. Eric nodded, his usual smirk gone. Ava stood. The wind still fierce but less suffocating. The panic wasn't gone, it never would be, but it was smaller, manageable. She'd faced the summit, her fear, and she was still here. Ethan's name on the rock felt like a bridge, connecting her guilt to something new, something stronger. Lars clapped her shoulder, his voice gruff. "Time to go. Storm's coming. You ready?" Ava nodded, her axe in hand, her heart lighter. "Yeah, I'm ready." The team roped up, preparing for the descent. Ava looked at the summit one last time, Ethan's name glinting in the ice. She'd come for him, but she was leaving with something for herself, proof she could face the fear and keep going. The wind on Gunjornfjell was a living thing, clawing at Ava Larsson as she descended the icy ridge just below the summit. It was July 2025, late afternoon on day 4. and the Arctic sky was a bruised gray, heavy with the threat of a storm. At 28, Ava was roped to her team, her crampons biting into the snow, her ice axe steady in her gloved hands. She'd conquered the peak, carved her brother Ethan's name into a rock, and faced a panic that nearly broke her. Now heading down she felt different, not fearless but stronger. Like the mountain had cracked her open and let something new spill out. Lars Jensen, their Greenlandic guide, led the way, his broad frame cutting through the swirling snow. 45. Lars was a machine, his gray eyes scanning the path for crevasses. Behind Ava, Eric and Sophia, the Norwegian climbers moved with caution, their earlier summit high fading as the descent's dangers sank in. The way down was no easier than the way up. Ice walls, narrow ledges, and wind that could knock you off your feet. Ava's legs ached. Her lungs burned in the thin air, but her focus was sharp, her fear a quiet hum instead of a roar. "Stay tight," Lars shouted, his voice muffled by the gale. "One step at a time." Ava nodded, her breath puffing white through her balaclava. She glanced back at the summit, where she'd left Ethan's name etched in stone. That moment, kneeling, crying, carving had shifted something in her. She'd come to honor Ethan, to finish his dream, but she was finding herself too. The panic that had gripped her up there wasn't gone, but it was smaller, a shadow she could face. The descent began with a steep snow slope, the team roped together for safety. Lars set the pace, his ice axe probing for hidden crevasses. Ava followed, her movements surer than they'd been on the ascent. Her training with Pete, her Colorado coach, was paying off. Her crampons found purchase, her axe sank deep. Eric behind her was quieter now, his cocky jabs silenced by the summit and Ava's grit. Sophia, last in line, hummed softly, a habit that calmed the team. They hit a rocky outcrop, a jagged stretch where ice gave way to loose stone. Lars paused, assessing the path. "Careful here," he said, his voice low. "Rocks are unstable. Move slow." Ava's heart thudded, memories of Ethan's rockslide flashing, his body tumbling, her screams useless. She pushed the image down, focusing on Lars's steps. She tested each rock, her axe a third point of contact, her breath steady. The wind picked up, snow stinging her goggles, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Then it happened. Eric, climbing behind her, misjudged a step. A rock shifted and he slipped, his body sliding toward a crevasse 10 feet away. The rope jerked, yanking Ava forward, her crampons scraping. "Eric!" she shouted, planting her axe and bracing her legs, her muscles screaming as she held the line. Lars spun, his voice sharp. "Hold him, Ava." "Sophia, anchor." Sophia drove her axe in, securing the rope, while Ava leaned back, her body a counterweight. Eric dangled, his breath ragged, his hands clawing at the ice. "I'm okay," he called, but his voice shook. Ava's arms burned, her heart racing, but she didn't let go. She thought of Ethan, of failing him, and gritted her teeth. "Not today," she muttered, pulling with everything she had. Lars scrambled to her side, grabbing the rope, and together they hauled Eric up, his boots finding traction. Eric collapsed on the snow, panting, his face pale. "Thanks," he said, his eyes meeting Ava's, no trace of his usual smirk. "You saved my ass." Ava nodded, her breath heaving, adrenaline still pumping. "Yeah, you're welcome." Lars clapped her shoulder, his grin rare but real. "Good work, Ava. You're a climber now." The words hit her like sunlight, warming the cold inside. She'd acted, not frozen, and it felt like a piece of Ethan's strength living in her. Sophia gave her a thumbs up, her eyes crinkling. The team rested, sipping water, the wind howling around them. Ava's fear was still there, but it was different now, less a monster, more a companion she could outwalk. The descent continued, the team navigating a series of ice fields and ledges. Ava took the lead on a gentler slope, her confidence growing. She'd slipped on the way up, panicked at the summit, but she was learning to trust her body, her instincts. Lars watched, his nod subtle but approving. "You're finding your rhythm," he said at one point, his voice low. "Keep it." Ava's chest swelled, but she stayed focused, her axe and crampons a steady beat. She thought of Mia, waiting at base camp, probably glued to the radio. As if on cue, the radio crackled, Mia's voice breaking through the static. "Ava, you guys okay? Weather's looking rough down here. Ava pressed the button, snow dusting her goggles. We're good, Mia. Heading down. Saved Eric's, but by the way. Mia's laugh was pure warmth. That's my girl. Tell Eric he owes you a beer. You holding up? Yeah, Ava said, surprised at how true it felt. It's hard, but
I'm okay.
you're a freaking superhero, Mia said. Keep it up. I'm here. Ava clipped the radio back. Mia's voice a lifeline. She glanced at the team, Lars's steady lead, Sophia's quiet strength, even Eric's newfound respect. They were a unit now, bound by the mountain, and Ava felt part of it. Not the outsider she'd been. That night, they camped at 2,000 meters. The storm Lars had warned about holding off but looming. The team huddled in a communal tent, sharing a hot meal, freeze-dried chili that tasted like heaven after days of protein bars. The wind rattled the walls, but inside it was warm, the headlamps casting a cozy glow. Sophia started a round of stories, her voice soft. First climb I did, I was 19, scared out of my mind. Fell into a snowbank, thought I'd die. But I got up. That's what mountains teach you. Eric, his ego softened, nodded. Yeah. I got cocky once, nearly slid off a cliff in Norway. My brother pulled me back. Owe him my life. Ava listened, her hands around a mug of tea. The stories easing her nerves. Lars looked at her, his eyes prompting. Your turn, Ava. Why this climb? She hesitated, Ethan's journal heavy in her pack. The team's eyes were on her, not judging, just waiting. She took a breath, her voice steady. My brother, Ethan. He died 5 years ago, climbing in Colorado. A rock slide. I was there, couldn't save him. He wanted to climb Gunjornfjell. Wrote about it in his journal. I'm here for him, but I think I'm here for me too. The tent was quiet, the wind outside a distant roar. Sophia reached over, squeezing her hand. That's a good reason, she said. Eric nodded, his face serious. Lars's eyes held something like pride. You honored him today, Lars said, his voice low. That carving, your strength. He'd be proud. Ava's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time, talking about Ethan didn't feel like drowning. Felt like breathing. She smiled, small but real. Thanks. The team shared more stories, laughter mixing with the wind's howl. Ava felt a warmth she hadn't expected. Not just from the chili, but from the bond forming around her. She'd come to the Arctic alone, but she wasn't anymore. The next day, the descent resumed, the team moving faster as the terrain eased. Ava led a section, her axe in Krampen's shore. Her fear a quiet hum she could ignore. They navigated a snowfield, Lars probing for crevasses, and crossed a rocky ridge, the wind less brutal now. Ava's body was tired, but her mind was clear. Ethan's memory a light instead of a weight. At one point Sophia slipped, her foot catching a loose rock. Ava reacted fast, grabbing her arm, steadying her. Sophia laughed, catching her breath. Nice reflexes, Ava. You're making us look bad. Ava grinned, her confidence solidifying. Just keeping up. Eric, trailing behind, called out. Not bad, Colorado. Not bad. The nickname didn't sting anymore. It felt like respect, hard-earned. Lars glanced back, his nod subtle but clear. Ava was no longer the rookie. She was part of the team, part of the mountain. By evening, they reached 1,500 meters, the base camp's lights faint below. The storm still loomed, but they'd outrun it for now. Ava's radio crackled, Mia's voice bursting through. Ava, you close? I've got coffee and a hug waiting. Ava laughed, her breath puffing in the cold. Almost there, Mia. Save some for me. You bet, Mia said, her voice thick with pride. You're killing it. See you soon. Ava clipped the radio back, her heart full. She looked at Gunjornfjell, its peak fading in the dusk. She'd faced its summit, her panic, her past, and she was still standing. Ethan's name was up there, carved forever. But Ava was carrying something new, strength. Not just for him but for herself. The base camp at the foot of Gunjornfjell glowed like a beacon in the Arctic dusk, its tints a warm contrast to the endless ice. It was July 2025, the final day of Ava Larsson's climb, and she trudged through the snow, her boots heavy but her heart light. At 28, Ava had conquered the highest peak in Greenland, faced a panic that nearly broke her. and carved her brother Ethan's name into the summit stone. Now descending with her team, she felt changed, not fearless but whole, like the mountain had rebuilt her from the inside out. Lars Jensen, their Greenlandic guide, led the way, his broad frame steady despite the long descent. At 45, Lars was a quiet hero, his gray eyes softened by pride in his team. Behind Eva, Eric and Sophia, the Norwegian climbers, laughed through their exhaustion, their bond forged by the mountain's trials. Eva's brown hair was crusted with frost, her green eyes bright behind her goggles. Her ice axe hung from her harness, a tool she now wielded with confidence. She'd come to honor Ethan, but she was leaving with something for herself, proof she could face fear and keep going. The camp's lights grew closer, and Eva's heart lifted at the thought of Mia Torres, her best friend, waiting with coffee and a hug. Mia's radio check-ins had been a lifeline, her voice a reminder of the world beyond the ice. Eva glanced at Gunjorn Fjell, its peak fading in the twilight. Ethan's name was up there, a mark of love and loss, but Eva carried his strength in her now, a flame that wouldn't fade. The final descent had been smoother, the team moving fast to beat a looming storm. Eva had led sections, her crampons and axe sure, her fear a quiet hum she could manage. She'd saved Eric from a crevasse, earned his respect, and steadied Sophia on a rocky ledge. Lars had called her a climber, and for the first time she believed it. The Arctic was still brutal, winds slicing through her parka, cold numbing her toes, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It was a teacher, harsh but fair. At 500 meters, the team spotted base camp, its tents a splash of color against the snow. Eva's radio crackled, Mia's voice bursting through. Eva, I see you guys. Get your butt down here.
I'm freezing.
Eva laughed, her breath puffing white. On my way, Mia. Got that coffee? Hot and ready, Mia said, her voice thick with joy. You're a freaking legend. Eva clipped the radio back, her grin wide. The team reached camp just as the sky darkened, snow flurries dancing around them. Mia ran out, her curly black hair spilling from her beanie, and tackled Eva in a hug that nearly knocked her over. You did it, Mia cried, her eyes shining. You climbed that monster. Eva hugged her back, tears freezing on her cheeks. Yeah, I did.
Lars,
Eric and Sophia joined them, their faces weary but smiling. The camp crew, 2 logistics guys and a cook, cheered, offering hot cocoa and blankets. The team sat around a heater, shedding layers, their laughter filling the tent. Eva sipped cocoa, her body aching but her heart full. She looked at her team, Lars's quiet nod, Sophia's warm smile, Eric's newfound respect, and felt a bond she hadn't expected. They'd faced the mountain together, and it had made them family. Mia pulled out her notebook, her journalist mode kicking in. Okay, Eva.
spill.
What was it like up there? Eva hesitated, Ethan's journal heavy in her pack. It was everything, she said, her voice soft. Scary, hard, beautiful. I panicked at the top. Thought I'd failed Ethan. But Lars, you pulled me through. I carved his name up there. And it felt like letting go. Mia's eyes softened, her pen pausing. That's powerful. You're gonna make people cry with this story. Eva smiled, shy but proud. Hope so. Lars raised his mug, his voice gruff. To Eva. And Ethan. You both climbed that peak. The team toasted, their mugs clinking, and Eva's throat tightened. Ethan was gone, but he was here in this moment in her strength. She'd done it, for him, for herself. Back in Colorado, Eva's life changed. She returned to Denver in August 2025, her apartment feeling small after the Arctic's vastness. Nimbus, her cat, greeted her with a purr, curling up on her lap as she unpacked. Ethan's journal sat on her desk, no longer a weight but a treasure, its pages a map of her journey. She'd faced Gunjorn Fjell, her fear, her guilt, and come out stronger. Now, She wanted to live that strength, not hide from it. Ava went back to climbing, not as a daredevil like Ethan, but as herself, cautious, steady, alive. She joined a local climbing group, scaling peaks in the Rockies, her hands sure on the rock. The mountains didn't scare her anymore. They were home, a place to remember Ethan without pain. She trained with Pete, her old coach, who grinned when she told him about the Arctic. "Knew you had it in you," he said, his beard twitching. "What's next?" Ava didn't have an answer, but she knew she'd keep climbing, keep facing the fear. She started a blog, Beyond the Summit, sharing her story. Ethan's death, her panic, her triumph. The posts went viral, readers moved by her honesty. Comments poured in. "You inspired me to face my own fears. Thank you for showing it's okay to be scared." Ava read them, tears in her eyes, realizing her climb had rippled beyond herself. Mia's article, The Arctic Climb, One Woman's Quest for Redemption, hit stands in September, published in a major adventure magazine. The photos, Ava on the ice, Ethan's carved name, made it unforgettable. Readers called it raw, inspiring, a story of grit and grace. Mia flew to Denver to celebrate, her grin wide as she handed Ava a copy. "You're a star," she said, hugging her. "And I'm writing a book about this. You cool with being the hero?" Ava laughed, her cheeks red. "Only if you're in it, too." Ava's impact grew. In spring 2026, she started a climbing program for teens, named Ethan's Ascent. It was small, 10 kids, a gym in Boulder, but it was hers, a way to pass on what the mountain had taught her. She taught them knots, belays, how to trust their fear instead of fight it. One girl, a shy 15-year-old named Lily, reminded Ava of herself, scared but stubborn. When Lily summited her first peak, a small ridge in the Rockies, she hugged Ava, crying. "I didn't think I could," she said. Ava smiled, her heart full. "You did. That's what matters." She organized a fundraiser for the program, a community event in Boulders Park. Climbers, friends, even her parents came. Their faces proud but softer now, their grief eased by Ava's light. Lars flew in from Greenland, his presence a surprise that made Ava cry. They hugged, his gruff voice warm. "You're doing good, Ava. Ethan would love this." They sat by a campfire that night, swapping stories. Lars shared plans for a new climb, nudging Ava to join. "Everest next," he teased, his eyes twinkling. Ava laughed, shaking her head. "Maybe. Let's start small." The event raised enough to expand Ethan's ascent, adding gear and scholarships. Ava felt Ethan in every moment, the kids' laughter, the campfire's glow, the mountains watching over them. She wasn't just honoring him. She was living for him, for herself. A year later, in summer 2026, Ava stood on a small peak in Colorado, alone with the sunset. The sky was fire red, orange, gold, spilling over the Rockies. She wore her climbing gear, her ice axe, a memento from Greenland, its handle worn from use. Her blog had grown, her program was thriving, and Mia's book was in progress, set to publish next year. Ava was no longer the girl who'd run from heights. She was a climber, a teacher, a sister still carrying Ethan's light. She pulled a notebook from her pack. Not Ethan's, but her own, started after the Arctic. She wrote, her pen steady. "Fear's part of me, but it's not me. I climbed for Ethan, but I live for us both. The summit's not the end. It's the start." A breeze stirred, warm and soft like Ethan's laugh. Ava closed her eyes, feeling him in the wind, the rock, the sky. "We did it," she whispered, her voice steady. "We're okay." She stood, the sunset painting her face, and looked at the mountains stretching west. They weren't enemies anymore, but friends, each peak a chance to grow, to live. Ava shouldered her pack, her steps sure, and started down, ready for whatever came next. Ava's journey shows that fear is universal, but courage is choosing to move through it. The Arctic taught her that strength isn't about being fearless. It's about facing the panic, leaning on others, and finding truth in the struggle. Her story inspires us to chase our own summits, big or small, knowing that every step, even the shaky ones, builds who we are. It's a call to honor those we've lost by living fully, bravely, with love.